stories for bedtime,
and car time, and playtime,
and anytime you want to hear how much Jesus loves you in all this world.
Even little birds.
Hi, I'm Pastor Sarah at St. Paul Lutheran Church in Davenport, Iowa. Welcome to this podcast where we tell stories told just for kids, and kids at heart. Every week we tell a story about Jesus from the Bible, and for this podcast, you are going to need to bring your imagination. We are going to imagine that there was a little bird in all those Bible stories, a little bird who was friends with Jesus, a little bird who saw all the stuff that Jesus did and heard all the things that Jesus said. Last week, we went with Little Bird and Jesus on a boat ride, and we heard Jesus say to the big storm, "Peace, be still." This week, we'll hear yet another amazing story about something Jesus did in an act of care and compassion for some people who really needed it. So now, settle in, turn on those imaginations, and listen to this week's story.
The little bird and Jesus healed an old woman and a young girl.
After that big storm, Jesus and his friends stayed out on the Sea of Galilee for a while. They rested and talked, they did some fishing, and just enjoyed some time in a beautiful place together. Even Little Bird, who didn't like to be out on the water on account of the fact that she didn't have webbed feet and couldn't swim, even she had fun. When they came back to shore, they were met by a whole lot of people waiting to see Jesus. At the front of the crowd was a tall man. Little Bird could tell that this man was important just by the way he was standing, big and tall and proud. Little Bird heard some of the disciples whispering to each other, "That's Jairus. He's one of the leaders at the synagogue where we meet for worship. He's an important guy, a good leader." Well, as soon as Jairus saw Jesus, this man who had been standing so proud and important, he fell down at Jesus' feet. "Jesus, teacher," he said, please would you come to my house? My 12-year-old daughter is so very sick. Please come and help, I beg you." Jesus reached down and helped Jairus stand up, and with kindness in his eyes, Jesus simply nodded and gestured for Jairus to show him the way to his house. And so Jairus and Jesus made their way through the crowd. There were so many people pushing and jostling just to be near Jesus. Little Bird was so very grateful for her wings, which carried her above the crowds of people. From up above, Little Bird saw an old woman on the edge of the crowd. She had a beautiful green scarf wrapped around her head. The color made her stand out a little as she leaned against a building. Little Bird could tell how worn out she was. She was watching Jesus with such hope and longing. Little Bird flew over to the old woman and landed on a ledge right next to her. The old woman noticed Little Bird. "Hi, little sparrow," the old woman said. "There are so many people here. I had hoped to ask Jesus to heal me. I've been bleeding so much for 12 years. I've spent all my money on doctors, but none of them have been able to help me. And now I am broke with no money and still so sick." Little Bird felt compassion for her. She hopped over to the woman and tried to give her a nudge to encourage her to go to the crowd to get close to Jesus. The woman laughed at Little Bird. "You're right. I'll just go to Jesus. If I even just touch the edge of his robe, I know I will be healed." And so the woman gathered up all her remaining strength and went out into the big crowd. Soon Little Bird could no longer see her through the people. And so Little Bird took off from her little ledge and flew above the crowd. She finally caught sight of the woman, her bright green headscarf in the crowd. She was getting closer to Jesus. Little Bird tweeted her cheers to her, encouraging her to keep pushing through the crowd to Jesus. The woman looked up and smiled, and then looked determined as she kept going. Little Bird saw her get right up behind Jesus and then watched as she reached and touched just the hem, the very edge of Jesus' robe. Right away, the woman heaved a sigh of relief. Little Bird could tell, even from the air, that she was healed by the expression of joy and wonder on her face. Jesus stopped and looked around. "Who touched me?" he asked. One of Jesus' friends answered, confused, "Everyone is touching you, Jesus. This crowd is enormous, and so many people are pressing in close to you." But Jesus looked around. "I know someone touched me. I felt the power go out from me." The woman walked to Jesus and fell at his feet. "Jesus, it was me. I touched you, and I was healed immediately. Thank you." She told him all about what she had been through and what happened that day. Jesus took her hand and helped the old woman stand. He said to her, "Daughter, you trusted me, even when it was risky. Now you are healed. Your faith has made you well. Go and live with joy." The old woman looked up to see Little Bird flying above her. She smiled and gave Little Bird a wink as she walked home, made fully well. But as Jesus was still talking, a man came up to Jairus. The man had tears streaming down his face, and he held Jairus' hand and said to him, "I am so sorry to tell you, but your daughter has died." Jesus heard this, and he told Jairus, "Don't be afraid. Trust me. Everything will be okay." And so they went as quickly as they could to Jairus' house. Little Bird flew high above, keeping an eye on Jesus as she soared. She got to the house first and saw everyone crying in grief for the little girl. She flew to the window, and she could see the girl lying on a bed inside. When Jesus got to Jairus' house, he saw everyone crying and said, "Don't cry. The little girl is just sleeping. She's not dead." But everyone laughed at him. Still, Jairus led Jesus to the room where his daughter was laying. Jesus went to the bedside. He took the little girl's hand, and quietly, gently, he said, "My beloved little girl, get up." And the little girl stood up, breathing, alive. She smiled at Jesus, and her parents rushed to hug her. And then Little Bird heard Jesus say, "Get that girl something to eat." The girl and her parents laughed as they held each other close and looked to Jesus with such gratitude and joy. They were so amazed at him. But Jesus said to them, "Don't tell anyone about what happened." And they agreed. But Little Bird agreed to no such thing. She could not keep it in. She had to tell the world about how amazing Jesus was, how he healed not only the old woman, but the young girl. And so Little Bird sang in praise and wonder. A whole crowd of people heard her song. Maybe when they saw a sparrow in the sky singing, maybe they'd guess that she was praising God. But they didn't know all that Jesus had done, how he loved with a love so big that not even sickness or death could stop it. Wow, what a miraculous story! It took a lot of courage for that woman to reach out to Jesus and for that father to trust Jesus to heal his sick daughter. What do you think it felt like for them to experience such things? These stories about healing are amazing. Even though we don't often get these same kind of healings anymore, Jesus is still so present with us when we are sick and when the people we love aren't feeling good. Jesus still brings comfort and courage to us when we need it most. We might not be able to take away the sickness from the people we care about, but we can still help others feel better. Maybe with a card or a phone call or some treats. This week, try doing something kind for someone who doesn't feel good. Even if it doesn't take away the hurt, it will surely help them feel better. And that's the end of this episode of Little Bird and Jesus.
Now flap your little wings. Sing a little song.
And remember that to Jesus,
You will always belong.
Thanks for listening to Little Bird and Jesus, a podcast of St. Paul Lutheran Church in Davenport, Iowa. For more information on St. Paul, visit us at stpaulqc.org. Come visit us again next week as Little Bird continues her journey.